Good morning, professors.
Good morning. Good to see all of you. Good morning, Dada.
Sir.
So, sir, we'll start as soon as director sir enters, and the flow will be first Aditi will give a welcome speech, basically an introduction speech. After that, Mukherjee sir, you will be giving the invocations. Post that, director sir will be giving his welcome address. Then, Sanjeev sir, you will be giving your speech, basically on leadership in the challenging times, and then the final. So, since everyone is here, so with your permission, shall we take everyone in and begin? Okay. So, Hemanga sir, we'll start, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. Shillong, please take everyone in.
But there are only 12 people.
No, so there are almost 155 people in the waiting room.
Okay.
We were waiting for the professors to join
fine,
and the director sir to join. So now we have all of them.
No
We'll
problem.
I'm admitting everybody.
Yeah.
I think everyone's here. So shall we begin? A very good morning to Director Sir, distinguished dignitaries, all the faculty and staff members present here, and budding leaders of tomorrow, our dear participants of various academic programs. We take immense pleasure in welcoming you all to the 4th edition of Business Leadership Summit 2021-22. 4 years ago, our seniors espoused an idea of bringing together industry stalwarts and business leaders on a single platform to share their ideas, experiences, and vision with the leaders of tomorrow. Today, we have built upon their ideas and are organizing an event that is going to witness participation from more than 25 distinguished domain experts spread across 6 sectors: consultancy, finance and investment, marketing, IT and analytics, operations, and human resources. So come, join us as we head on this journey of learning and upskilling ourselves, enriched by the discussions, defining experiences of the leaders and their viewpoints on umbrella theme of our event, changing facets of businesses, a decade of paradigm shift, and the road ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aditi. Next, I would like to call upon Sanjay sir for the invocation. Sir, please.
Namaskar. The sun rises the first in the northeast in India. So we begin this invocation to sing the glory of the sun god. Om Namo Vivasvate Brahman Bhasvate Vishnu Tejase Jagat Savitre Shuchaye Savitre Karmadayini Ehi Surya Sahasrangsha Tejurashe Jagatpate Anukampayamang Nityang Grihan Arhyang Rivakara Om Javakusma Shankasham Kashyapeyang Mahadyuting Dhantaring Sarvapapaghanam Pranadeosmi Divakaram Dhantaring Sarvapapaghanam Pranadeosmi Divakaram. O thou effulgent sun god, with the radiation of the glory of Lord Vishnu, may I receive even 1,000th part of your blessings and your illumination that will light up my life, my work, my path. May it dispel all the darkness of ignorance, of inertia, and put me into the path of enlightenment. The sun, according to Indian wisdom, rides on 7 horses. These 7 horses can be likened to 7 leadership qualities. And these 7 leadership qualities were identified by none else but Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, the great leader, while he was describing the leadership of Swami Vivekananda, his guru. So these 7 leadership qualities, the 7 horses of the sun god, are reckless in his sacrifice, unceasing in his activities, profound and versatile in his wisdom, boundless in his love, exuberant in his emotions, merciless in his attacks, and yet as simple as a child. May these 7 leadership qualities awaken and enlighten all of us in this journey in our Business Leadership Summit. We conclude with a chanting for peace, a Shanti mantra from the Upanishads. Om Sahanau Avatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navadhitam Mastu Ma Vidvishavahai Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. This Shanti mantra is dedicated to the joy and path of learning. Together, may we move ahead in this path of learning and protect each other. Together, we may relish and enjoy this learning voyage. Together, may we perform and reach excellence in all our learning process with all our energy and vigor. May this learning lead to our illumination of knowledge. May this fill us with the brilliance of wisdom. May it not give rise to hostility among ourselves. Peace in the material world, physical world. Peace in the natural and environmental world. And finally, peace in the psychical, mental, and the spiritual world. Namaskar. May this invocation herald an auspicious beginning of the Business Leadership Summit of IIM Shillong on this day, 2022.
Thank you, Mukherjee sir, for those deep and profound incantations. Now, I would take this opportunity to invite Professor D.P. Goel, Director, IIM Shillong, to deliver the welcome address. So please.
Dear esteemed corporate leaders, my all faculty, officers, and staff colleagues, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and hearty welcome to this 4th Business Leadership Summit. I'm grateful to the organizer of the BLS Summit for inviting me this morning and providing an opportunity to interact with you all. I'm told that the focus of this summit is changing facets of businesses, a decade of paradigm shift and the road ahead, a decade to remember with major accomplishments for the country, becoming the fastest growing nation in the world, our achievements in our space programs, engineering, technology, major reforms in governance, etc., and also coronavirus pandemic, which changed the way businesses had been designed to do what they were doing since the first industrial revolution. Through this summit, an attempt is to explore how a decade of innovations and shifts has changed the way businesses operate, while maintaining the core principles and values despite being subject to a need of adaptation, failure in which is not just another option. While the last decade saw revolutionary changes, the next decade anticipates changes in the ecosystem at a much faster pace. So it becomes even more crucial for the future leaders to understand these changes in depth and learn from the very best in different fields. IIM Shillong was established in 2007 as the 7th IIM of the country. And in our last 14 years, we are happy to note that we have made significant contributions in quality management education and research. Every year, we host the industry veterans who share their wisdom with some of the brightest minds of the country and the leaders of tomorrow. In our bid of gathering some of the most influential thought leaders who deliberate upon the future of business and policy, we seek to ignite amongst these young minds with the light of immense opportunities of the future, especially for our own country, that's India. With this, I once again welcome to the Business Leadership Summit 2021-2022 of IIM Shillong and hope that we explore and deliberate on various ideas in this summit. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. Now, I would like to invite Sanjeev Kakoti, sir, to enrich us with his words of wisdom on the topic of leadership in challenging times. So please.
Thank you very much. We woke up to a very bright and sunny morning in Shillong. After days of rain, it was very welcome. And the sun, as it was spreading its rays and its warmth, also started the 4th edition of the Business Leadership Summit. Professor D.P. Goel, Director of the Institute, my colleague, Professor Sanjeev Mukherjee, and others. I can't see them, but maybe they're around. The invited guests and my dear student friends. Actually, challenging is a mild word. What we are witnessing is a crisis situation in the world. This kind of a crisis comes once in a lifetime. It's come to us in about 100 years. 100 years ago, we had the Spanish flu that wiped away almost half the world population. And here we are with another crisis. And what kind of a leadership is required in a crisis situation like this to set the tone of the morning? You'd be amazed to know that the top 10 corporates of the world have a combined turnover that is higher than the GDP of the 100 poorest countries. That is the depth and reach of the corporate world. And what are the challenges that the world faces today? 10% of the world population control 90% of its resources. 90% of the people have 10% of the resources. Roughly 2% have more than almost 70% of its resources. So there is a wealth and resource asymmetry, which unless addressed, would create a lot more crises in the future. What other challenges do we face? The other major challenge that the world is facing is the rapid urbanization. For instance, China in the next 10 years would have roughly the population of the USA today move to cities, urbanization. Same is the case with India, same is the case with almost all countries, that in search of better opportunities, be it in terms of health, be it in terms of education, be it in terms of employment, be it in terms of security, livelihoods, whatever, people are flocking to the cities. And once millions of people just come in, descend onto the cities, the urban centers are unable to take that load. Transportation, electricity, clean drinking water, housing, health, education, transportation, everything just is incapable of taking on that additional number of people who come in. So how do we address this issue? There is the problem of good food. Almost all food is laced with chemicals that's leading to all kinds of diseases. But with the growth in population, exponential growth in population, there is a challenge of giving food to everybody. Millions of people go to bed hungry every night, and the godowns are overflowing with food. There is a asymmetry even there. So with regards to health, we have seen that health is an area of major concern. Most of the health initiatives of the world has been on providing hospital and other care for people after they fall ill. The pharmaceutical industry continues to be one of the fastest growing industries in the world. Now, the question is, in the Indian traditions, health has never been seen as something that is after you fall sick. Health has always been seen as something that you preserve right from the beginning. So good practices, good food, exercises, these are something that the Indian tradition has always talked about. It is preventive health. Can industry come in and create avenues for preventive health for the millions of people all around the world? Medicines, even though they are available, if you look at different kinds of drugs that are available, most of the drugs are actually out of reach of the poor. India again had played a very, very important role in the control of HIV/AIDS in Africa. Millions of people were getting killed in Africa because of HIV/AIDS. And the drugs were available to the rich countries, but they were out of reach of the poor Africans. So Indian industry actually stepped out and started the manufacture of generic drugs, which were given at a fraction of the cost that the other drugs were costing. And this in turn changed the entire game of providing health to people in Africa, and India is credited with providing that leadership. We are facing serious crisis in the energy sector. Much of the energy comes from non-renewable sources, so the shift to renewable sources continues to be a major challenge. We are running out of water. Many cities are actually becoming dry. There is no more water. We have depleted groundwater resources. The rivers are polluted. The oceans are full of plastic. So what do we do about the water? Without water, we will not survive. So the other major challenge is the provision of good, clean drinking water and preserving our sources of water. And lest I miss out on the most alarming situation that we face and that we are not even thinking about, is that in the next 10 years, it is estimated that if global warming goes up at the rate at which it is going, sea levels will rise by about 1 meter. And can you imagine what would happen if the sea levels rise by 1 meter? More than half the world will be underwater. And what would happen to the millions of people who are living in areas that would be flooded? They would have to migrate to higher areas. And this is going to cause tremendous problems. They would be known as ecological refugees. And the world has absolutely no idea what to do with the situation when it actually comes. So when I started, I talked about 10 top corporations having a turnover of more than the GDP of the 100 poorest countries. So which means that the challenges cannot be met by government alone. The leadership has to be provided by the corporate sector, by business. And this is what leadership is going to be all about. It is simply not just about increasing the profit margins and having a better balance sheet to show, but it would mean taking proactive steps to ensure that the world is livable for the next generations to come. So is this the leadership that we aspire for? Yes, that is the leadership we aspire for. And this is a crisis moment. A tiny little virus shut us up for 2 years. Most of you will be completing your MBA degrees with very, very little of offline classes of interaction. So this is the tragedy that even children are facing, adults are facing. Work from home has become a new norm. So what are the new norms that we will adopt? How do we take the next steps? This is not just a challenge, my dear friends. This is a crisis. And it is in crisis that the best leadership comes out. And I am just waiting to see how many leaders we can produce who will make that decisive stand and take those decisive steps that would save humanity. Because the latest report about extinctions of species says that at the top of the list is the human race. So with that, on that somber note, I think I have completed my quota of 10 minutes as given to me. So thank you very much. We shall be having 2 very exciting days of panel discussions with some of the stalwarts coming in, sharing their ideas with our young minds. And that synergy between the experience and the new certainly can move mountains. And we hope to see a lot of new leadership trends coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us with your words of wisdom, and especially touching on the parts of sustainability for which we are known for across the industry and across the country. Now, I would like to call upon Mukherjee sir once again to propose the formal vote of thanks. Sir, you're on mute.
Yes. My esteemed colleague, Professor Rohit Joshi, the chair of Student Affairs, Placement and PR, should have been the right person here to offer the vote of thanks, but he's tied up in some urgent institutional activities. So I'm honored on behalf of the entire institute community to offer the vote of thanks. I first thank our esteemed director, Professor D.P. Goyal, for his constant inspiration to us to the students, to all the members of the Institute fraternity to make such programs in spite of the turbulence that Professor Kakoti mentioned about and make this a success. So thank you, sir, for your kind words and your gracious presence today amongst us. Thank you, Professor Sanjeev Kakoti, my esteemed colleague, for your articulation in very clear and very powerful terms. What is the current scenario world over and the challenges? Challenges, he said, is a mild word to overcome these obstacles that we have today and the leadership that is needed out of us. So thank you, Professor Kakoti, for your insightful observations and the inspiration you provided to all of us, especially the students, to go ahead in this journey of leadership. I thank all the members of the Institute community, the faculty, the staff, the officers, for making this event a great beginning. I won't call it a success because success will be decided at the end of it, right? So a great beginning. It was possible because of unstinted support from all the members of the Institute fraternity. A special words of thanks to all the students, or should I thank you, or should I not, for all your involvement, which made this possible for us to hold this. And finally, well, to all the members of the corporate world, the great leaders who are there, in spite of their busy schedule, they have agreed to be with us, take part in our panels, and offer their wisdom, their experiences, their insights on leadership in these turbulent times. So thank you, everyone, every panelist from all over India, from different corporate houses. Thank you very much for agreeing to be with us. Well, friends, I would also thank the great ambience that we have here. You know, we cannot work without an ambience. So as Professor Kakoti said in the beginning, today after a long time, the sun has come up in the morning. So thank you, sun god and the great nature. Because of their blessings and their radiance and their grace, we are able to happily begin this Business Leadership Summit. So friends, with the mantra of Charaiveti of the Upanishads, which means to go ahead, march ahead, let's begin this journey. The three prayers of the Upanishads: from darkness lead me to light, from the unreal lead me to the real, and from death lead me to immortality. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma mritangamaya. May this journey begin towards excellence, towards perfection, towards enlightenment for individual and all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I would request the consulting club to take over from here to begin with our panel discussions scheduled for today.
Good morning, all. To begin with the first panel discussion of the 4th edition of Business Leadership Summit, we have the Consulting and Strategy panel. I would now like to welcome our esteemed panel members. Amongst us, we have Mrs. Bhanupriya Sudhakar. Ma'am is a director at Nelson IQ. She has over 20 years of experience in market research and has spent a large part of her career at Nelson. Ma'am has done her engineering in electronics and MBA in marketing and market research and works closely with large FMCG clients contributing to business growth. She has and continues to deliver guest lectures at IIM Bangalore and other premier B schools. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. Next, we have Mr. Gunjan Kumar. Sir has over 15 years of experience in strategy functions across healthcare, consumer electronics, IT, and information services industry at Genpact, HP, McKinsey and Company, and Thomson Reuters. In his current role as Senior Director, Corporate Strategy at Thomson Reuters, he leads strategy projects across different business units globally. In addition, he also leads diversity and inclusion initiatives for India. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Next, we have Mr. Harsh Parekh. Sir is a banker turned entrepreneur. He started his career as a chartered accountant and later shifted towards investment banking. Over time, he became an advisor of choice at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Further, he started his own venture Briefcase in 2016. Briefcase is India's first ABDM integrated PHR app and health locker that provides its users a secure, online, easy-to-use access to personal health records that is accessible by them at any point of time from anywhere. Mr. Harsh is also an avid traveler who loves to meet new people and develop new relationships, contributing to the growth of businesses. Thank you, sir, for joining us as a panelist. Next, we have Mr. Jitendra Dwivedi. Sir has over 14 years of experience and is currently working as a project manager at Vector Consulting. He has done his BTech from IIT Bombay and MBA from ISB Hyderabad. During his stint as a management consultant, he has facilitated business transformation across domains like automotive industry, retail chain, and startup environments. He has also played a key role in devising go-to-market strategy for these organizations. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Next, we have Mr. Ram Panda. Sir is a senior director at Alvarez & Marsal, focusing on strategy and commercial due diligence in the healthcare sector. He brings to table approx 13 years of experience of working with large consulting firms as well as strategy divisions of large conglomerates. He specializes in strategy, commercial due diligence, value creation plans for the entire spectrum of these segments. Thank you, sir, for joining us today.
Now I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Sanjeev Kakoti. He was born and educated in Shillong. After post-graduation in history, he did a PhD in the history of technology from Northeastern Hill University. He completed the 3-tier Emerging Leaders Program of Management from IIM Ahmedabad. A man of many talents, he is a teacher, writer, and a documentary filmmaker. He was also awarded the Professor of the Year Award by Insight IIM in 2019. He has also authored books on technology and social formation in medieval Assam. Thank you, sir, for accepting our proposal to moderate the discussion. Now I would like to introduce the topic for today. Global economies faced a tumultuous start of the decade with the world recovering from the 2008 economic meltdown. Businesses tried to implement more inherent and micro-level changes as they navigated the changing macro environments. During the decade, the companies faced various transformational periods where they had to alter their strategies. The success of these strategies hinged on their precise implementation. The consultancy world also emphasized the end-to-end execution of the strategies rather than just preparing a plan for the companies. Thus, it is critical to analyze how different businesses strategies evolved over the decade and aided in building a more robust and resilient business model. On this note, the topic for the panel discussion is, how has strategic planning and consulting evolved from being the brain to the backbone of the businesses? Now I will request Dr. Kakoti to please take the discussion forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Anshul. This is indeed a great privilege for me to be part of a panel that starts off the Business Leadership Summit. And I welcome on board the very esteemed members of the corporate world who's agreed to be with us on a Saturday morning. Normally it's work and work from Monday to Friday, and Saturday you want to relax, but they have agreed to come and be with us. Thank you, sirs, and thank you, ma'am, for being with us. As I was speaking, I would like to take off from where we left off. And that is the challenges that we face. Being a teacher and an academician, there is always a lot of questions that come to mind. And I was looking at the New World Order that has come about, where even though we are so very fond of holding up our nationalism and talking about national boundaries. But businesses have actually made redundant those very boundaries. Multinational companies operated from one or two countries initially, but now they span the globe. Post Second World War, when the world was devastated, the Bretton Woods Summit and other summits actually wanted to create a new economy and what we see is the globalized world order. So where the UN failed, I mean, the UN wanted to unite the world and remove wars and have peace and fraternity. The UN has not succeeded, but the corporate world has, in the sense that the large corporates, they have brought about a fraternity in dealing with the world and its businesses. And what we find today is we have had many chapters of development. We have had the GATT, we had the WTO, and now we have the globalized world order where things are much different. Now, two very important aspects that we're going to look at is how has strategic planning and consulting evolved from being the brain to the backbone. Now, I would like to seek a small little modification to the thing. I wouldn't want to say that from being the brain to the backbone. Let's call it from being the brain and the backbone. I think that kind of sets it better, because it's not just the brain, it is also the backbone of the world today. Now, why is it important for us to acknowledge that strategy and consulting happens to be the brain and the backbone? Because what we see in the world today was a result of strategy. We created institutions like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and others to actually give access to resources and money to countries and organizations to start their journey. And this is what it was. Certainly a result of strategy, and it was certainly a result of deep thinking. Now, we have, in the previous section, we have talked about some of the challenges that the world faces. And the only way that we can overcome these challenges is to have the right kind of strategy, and we would need to give the right kind of advice through our consultancies. Now, I would like to start from the lady of the group. I think we should be free enough to call each other by name. I think it would make life easier for us. So if that's okay with the panel, let's call each other by name, including myself. So I would like to request Bhanupriya to kindly set the ball rolling as to her thoughts on this.
Thank you, Professor Sanjeev. Good morning, everyone. This is indeed a great day to start the session with young minds, right? I get very excited when I start talking to young minds, and thanks for giving me this opportunity today. I just wanted to check, we've had a small module, a presentation. Should we start with that or we get into the conversation?
As you wish. I mean, I am open to either, whatever is comfortable with you, ma'am.
Okay. I mean, if the presentation is not required, I'm okay to get into a conversation as well. So, that's fine with me. Okay. Let me just start by introducing Nielsen, right? I'm sure you are aware of Nielsen and the kind of work that we do, but let's go back to the 90s, right? 1923 is when Nielsen was started, right? By Dr. Arthur Nielsen. We started tracking tractors, because that was the key those days, right? However, if you look back, from the tracking to farming equipments, way back in 1923, the journey that we have come today, we now track, measure, provide insights and consulting to all our clients on anything that you can think of, right? Be it FMCG products, be it pharma, be it auto, be it telecom, IT, digital, anything. So that's the journey. And how are we able to do it, right? Because things are changing, as we discuss on the topic of the day today, nothing is, permanent, right? Things keep changing, especially in the last 10 years, we've seen phenomenal changes in the market, in the minds of the consumers, and we will have to adapt. As businesses, we will have to adapt to what changes are happening in the market, and that's what exactly Nielsen has been doing. I mean, we would have gone out of business if we were very rigid and firm and said that, no, I started with this and I'm going to stick to this, right? I mean, we cannot. We will have to change. And our journey is, right, we work with manufacturers and retailers, and our core domain is FMCG. So today in this conversation, you'll see me talk more about the FMCG sector, right? And I lead the FMCG sector in Nielsen, right? Manufacturers, retailers, consumers, it's like a circle, right? Whatever happens in the market, consumers go through it. Marketers, manufacturers want to know what is there in consumers' mind, how have their purchase behaviors change, and therefore they come back to us and say that this is how I want to track it, right? And then we start tracking consumers. So it's like a circle. And this circle, there is no end to it, right? I mean, it keeps happening, and we will have to keep evolving ourselves to make sure that we are there in today's market, providing actionable insights to consumers, marketeers, and retailers. Yeah, if anyone wants to add anything. I think we'll keep the questions in the end, right?
We'll do it in the end. So what we do is we have this kind of a introductory statement from each of the panelists.
Sure.
So maybe Harsh Parikh could take over next.
Thank you, Sanjeev. So when it's an honor to be talking today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. When the topic was put at me about organizational planning, the first thing that comes to my mind is organizational agility. Today, or rather for years, changes in competition, demand, technology, regulations have always made it important for organizations to be able to respond and adapt as soon as possible. But now, especially given not only the last 2 years of what we've experienced during COVID, but even given how fast-moving technology itself has been in the last decade, the ability to quickly reconfigure strategy, structures, processes, people, and even technology again to continue to create value for your customers is become a huge factor in the success of organization. In fact, if you look at COVID, how it has played out, and especially in the madness of how the Nifty is valued today, you will actually see that the common pattern that distinguishes the men from the boys is that companies that were able to adapt quickly, be it their supply chains, be it their product offerings, be it their marketing strategies, in the first 6 months of COVID, are the ones that have emerged winners today. So that, according to me, and especially coming from the startup world and the healthcare startup world, I see that for any organizational, agility has now become a very, very key and important trait to be part of the planning process. It is to give you a little bit of background of what we do, Briefcase is actually India's first health locker and PHR app to be integrated into the government's ABDM mission. The ABDM mission is an initiative by the government to actually connect each and every healthcare service provider, be it your labs, your hospitals, your individual doctors, insurance companies, so that information in healthcare flows as freely as it should, but with patient consent. Why this is important here is because work on this started by in a very serious note by the government just around the time COVID hit. A lot of white papers and consultations had already happened before that, but real work started in around early to mid 2020, and we've actually witnessed what I was talking about in Briefcase itself, where to be able to come out as the first ABDM enabled PHR app and health locker, the amount of changes we've had to make in the tech team, divert resources, that agility led us to be where we are. And when it comes to agility, it's amazing that to be agile an organization needs to be both dynamic and stable. It's not so. If anybody has witnessed a video of lightning in a slow motion, about 3 lakh, 4 lakh frames per second, it doesn't move in a straight line, right? Lightning moves one bit and another bit and another bit, one after the other. And it is extremely important that is how organizations will also need to move, but the direction has to be constant. So dynamic practices will enable companies to be nimble, to quickly adapt to new challenges and opportunities. But at the same time, there has to be a fine balance with stability and stable practices, which will cultivate reliability, efficiency. It will actually drive in what the brand stands for. I mean, every time there is a brand survey, a brand loyalty survey, a brand valuation survey, the biggest name that comes up in India is the Tata brand. And no matter what, there are a few things that we will always associate the Tata brand to be about. If some company or a product has the Tata logo on it, there is a certain value to that. So that comes from the stable practices. So it is important to be agile, but to be agile, one has to be dynamic and stable, and a fine balance has to be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I quite like the analogy of the lightning. And whenever I think of lightning, I think of both its pattern of movement and the speed. In spite of the fact that it moves in a zigzag fashion, its speed is amazing. So probably we need to be mindful of bringing about changes in the way we are doing our business through strategy and consulting, so that a lot of things can be done. But anyway, before we come to that, I would like to come to Mr. Ram Panda, then Mr. Jitendra Dwivedi. Mr. Gunjan Kumar is having a little bit of a network issue, but he will connect with us over phone. But I will come to him last. So Mr. Ram Panda.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev. It's indeed an honor to be part of this panel. I'll maybe reflect on the topic at hand, because when this topic was presented, I basically went back a decade, because that's what my experience has been. It's close to about 12 years now. I have had a mix of consulting as well as industry experience, where I've focused on, where I worked with maybe strategy teams of conglomerates. So I went back and started thinking about what has changed in the last decade. Right now, as I think about it, what I notice is, it's so synonymous that I represent an organization which is built on transformations, or which is built on bankruptcy, which is built on restructuring. Now, if you think about it, why have companies gone to that level, right? If you think about it, I think companies have gone to that level. I think that's because, one, either they did not adapt to changes. I think like Harsh was talking about, them being more agile, the strategy to be in place. So that's one, right? So companies not adapting to economic conditions, etc. Second, the big play is technology. So what we notice is, in the ever-changing landscape of technology, if you're not adapting yourself to, say, the newer technologies that come to the forefront, then in that case, you're going to lag behind. It has happened with multiple companies, and a lot of these companies would have done restructuring on the behalf of banks, right? So I can talk on behalf of that. But then that's a larger theme that you notice that technology is becoming more and more important when it comes to strategy teams. Gone are the days when the strategy team used to just make good PowerPoint slides, but now it's all about how do you incubate it? There are new ideas that are there. Now the CXOs are just saying that, okay, why don't the strategy team take it to a certain level, incubate this, and then post that, give it to the operational teams to take it forward. So it's again becoming a feature of how strategy teams are being looked at from the senior management. Consulting also, as I think about it, I think now it has also become a blend of this. Earlier, we used to just maybe take a strategy project, execute it, present it to the senior management, and then maybe the role diminishes from there on. But now companies are basically coming forward and saying that, why don't you take a skin in the game? Why don't you come forward, execute it? And then if you execute it well, why don't you take a share of that rather than taking fee upfront? So this is becoming more and more execution oriented, all the roles that I'm talking about. Last 2 years, what has happened largely is even though I work largely in healthcare, I think Harsh will relate to this, that when we talk about healthcare has been a sector which has been last in terms of adopting technology. I think they have been mostly, doctors have been saying that, okay, this is not something that is that we can adopt faster, because they think the clinical decision making will be challenged. They think they'll face a lot of challenges. So in terms of either when you look at, say, digital EMR adoption, very, very minimal, and more so even in the developed world. I'm not talking about India only, I'm talking about developed world as well. Adoption is very limited. But what has happened in the last 2 years is that everybody is now open, right? So when we talk to companies now, people are just saying, okay, good that you're laying this strategy for us. Okay, you have talked about which all segments that we need to enter, what do we need to do, but what do we also need to do in terms of our digital strategy? Okay, what technologies do we need to invest in for us to stay nimble, say, in the next 4 or 5 years, because the technology is changing, right? All the facets of the business that everybody thought of the traditional way is completely changing, right? So just in a nutshell, when I think about, say, how strategy teams within organizations and also consulting is evolving, one broad theme that is emerging is now strategy is becoming not only of the big boys, but also smaller companies are taking strategy very seriously. Earlier, what we used to notice is typically strategy is a domain of, say, maybe if you're looking at a startup, or if you're looking at, say, maybe a smallish company, a small cap or so, you would notice that strategy is largely a domain of the promoter or maybe the CEO. But now I've seen a lot of companies actually investing in strategy, head of strategies, and these are typically roles which we notice now compared to it was earlier. Second, what I notice is inorganic is becoming a part of the game, right? So because again, it comes from appreciation that we can't build everything ourselves. Big companies are becoming mature. They're understanding that when it comes to a technology game, everything can't be organic. So you need to start thinking about inorganic ways to acquire either certain different technologies, or maybe think about, say, investing in certain R&D machines to get access to those patents, etc. So that also is again a theme that is emerging. All part of all consulting engagements for us. I think it ends with us talking about an inorganic strategy, which companies they can think of in terms of acquisitions. So that becomes like another broader theme that I've looked at. Third, what is really happening is that because of what has happened because of COVID, beyond these two themes that I talked about, third is digital is becoming like a broader theme, right? And everybody is looking at different means in which digital will impact their businesses. Now, when I talk about, when I say what is digital doing, I think they are referring to each and every process. It's not only the front end, but also the back end. How can that be improvised by using digital means is becoming like a core theme now, right? So largely these are three themes that are emerging, at least from whatever interactions that we have had. And when I introspect on my journey of the last 12 years, at least I could think about these broader themes that have emerged, at least in the last 3 years, how teams have evolved.
Thank you very much. The discussion is certainly getting more interesting. And with each person coming in with his own experience, I think we'll have a lovely discussion. Next, I'd like to call upon Mr. Jitendra Dwivedi. You are, yeah.
Yeah, hello, Sanjeev ji, hello.
Hello.
Everyone, good talk, yeah. I'm really enjoying this conversation which is happening. Thank you for the institution to invite me here. Yeah, so about the strategic planning that we were discussing, and as Sanjeev ji, you were saying, and the earlier speakers also, that how the strategic planning is more and more becoming the blood of the companies, right? Let me give a flavor about the changing dynamics which has happened from what I see in the industry. Earlier, what used to happen, that the things like strategic planning and all that were the things which were discussed in the boardroom. The CEOs and the COOs are who are discussing these things. The plannings are done on a yearly level or quarterly level, or even monthly level. The plannings are done, and then day-to-day execution, everything, yeah, that is the job of the people who are down below, and they run the mill on and on. But what has happened now over time? First thing, customer preferences, which has always actually been varying, just that the scales are bigger now across locations, across products. So what if your monthly or quarterly planning are not in line with what is happening in the market? Yeah, so then it becomes a problem. Okay, so when the boardroom people started understanding this, they started getting into that, okay, what is happening at a weekly level? What are my dashboards? How am I selling across locations, across products and all that? And that is how now the planning and the execution, there has to be a lot of flexibility here. Okay. Now, earlier, another big thing which used to happen is this, that, okay, customer preferences are changing. We need to respond to that. Consider a typical distribution company. They would always have inventories to fall back on. They have suppliers, they have their production units, they'll build it and they'll supply wherever they're getting changing demands. But in the last few years, and I would say not just COVID actually, even before that, the tsunami which happened, the suppliers which were basically the capacities were not available. So now we don't even have the inventory to fall back on, cannot build it. I believe me, I've seen companies who are actually a typical FMCG company, and the expiry of their products is 8 or 9 months, and the inventory that they have built is more than 8-9 months. They are going to get expired before they are sold to the customers. Yeah, so keeping inventory doesn't work. High inventory doesn't work. This the companies have realized. Now, if the inventory doesn't work, then what do? You put up a more tighter system. The things which are happening at a consumer end, how quickly am I able to respond to that through my supply chain, through the suppliers also? Okay, again, because the suppliers' capacities are limited, which we see now becoming very much a big topic, then these suppliers are supplying to many companies. Now, clearly, the company who would be able to identify it and give these signals to the suppliers, they will be more secure, right? The companies who will respond less, in a delayed way, they will not get the supplies. So, which is why now this strategic planning and all that, this is not just a boardroom talk now. The production people, the ground level people are talking about it. Because at the end of the day, the company needs to sell. Yeah, so this is the overall theme which I see here, and when how consulting plays a role here. The companies have a lot of data, frankly speaking. There are registers, there are reports, there are all these sales reports. How do you get this data and make a usable format of it? How do you make decisions out of it? This is where, if I see in the last 10 years, the consulting industry has been helping these conventional companies in a far bigger way. You have the data, okay, let me help you out to churn it out and make sense of it, and then get it down to the execution level on a daily level. So this is what I would like to say on an opening line. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was fascinating about inventory. I mean, this is a persistent problem that every industry is facing, and there seems to be no immediate solution for this. But anyway, we'll get into more details about that. I would now like to request Mr. Gunjan Kumar if you'd be able to connect with us, and we'd like to hear from you, sir. Mr. Gunjan Kumar, can you hear us? Unfortunately, he's having network issues today, of all days. We were looking forward to having with us Mr. Gunjan Kumar. As and when he's able to connect, Anchal, if you can just let me know, then because he'd probably be connecting through phone.
Or, I'll do that.
Yeah, right. Thank you. So one thing that I have always been thinking about is that sometimes I feel strategy is more in a reactive mode to the scenario that exists. So there are two words, reactive, proactive. And mostly when the client puts in a request or a desire, so consultants and strategies, they come together and try to come up with a solution, a problem. Now, this reactive and proactive approach, I think, could we spend some time thinking about it? I mean, you guys are the guys who can make a difference, because companies or most of the CEOs and COOs, they are normally thinking about short term. Now, Mr. Hirsch talked about Tatas. Tatas were thinking long term. So in the short term, their profit margins might have been less. A rival might have had more profit margins in the same business. but because of their very, very strong core values, probably they played it out long term. Now, the opportunity I see here is for strategists and consultants to slowly introduce the concept of being proactive rather than being reactive to creating solutions for problems that have not yet arisen. I mean, could we do that? I mean, is that a possibility? Could I follow the same order in which we started? We could hear all your views on this, starting with Bhanupriya, please.
Yeah, sure. So you, in your initials, talk, you spoke about urbanization, right? So urbanization at an overall level, at a global level, it's about 54%. And this is supposed to reach 66% in 2050. If you look at India, it stands about 35% today, and it is supposed to reach about 42% in 2050. So that's a kind of increase that we're seeing in urbanization, right? I called out urbanization because that's just one part of it, right? There are too many changes happening everywhere, right? In terms of the purchase behavior, the earnings, the spends, education, I mean, whatever you look at it, right? Yes, consultants, strategists started in a very reactive mode. I mean, even be it Nielsen. Let me just start the journey of how we started tracking these products and providing insights to our consumers, right? Earlier marketers used to say, okay, I need to know how much do I sell in the market, right? When I talk about FMCG, it could be like soaps or shampoos or beverages, anything. I just need to know how much do I sell in the market and what is my market share, how much have I grown over last year or last month, right? But the market has become so challenging that that doesn't suffice at all, right? Over a period of time, people want to know how much am I selling this week? How much did I sell yesterday? And if it's online, how much did I sell this hour or in the last 30 minutes? If you look at Amazon or the Flipkart sale, which is happening, there are people sitting in the room and it's like stock exchange board, right? You could see the purchases happening every second. So that's how the, things are tracked, and that is required. Now, if these are the changes which is happening in the market, I will have to be there. I will have to provide those reads to the manufacturers, our people who are using it at that speed. Right? I cannot sit back and say that, okay, you've sold so much, but I'll give it to you next month. It doesn't help. Postmortem doesn't help at all. I will have to be very, very proactive, making sure that I give these insight ahead of time, or at least it has to be real time, right? So how have things changed, right? Today we have a product, if you look at market, I am able to provide details to a client at a pin code and a ward level. From where I started it at reporting at a state level or even a metro town level, today I can tell the client that this is what you should be doing in this particular pin code. This is the kind of people who live in this pin code. Therefore, you should be marketing your products. These are the products which will sell. These are the products which will not sell. I go and tell a retailer, this is a kind of affluence, a potential that this particular location has, and you should open a store or you should not open a store. Right? So that's a kind of granularity which, kind of comes in. And online digital, it doesn't help if I just go back and tell an Amazon or a Flipkart that this is the kind of sale that you make. I mean, they know their own sales, right? But everybody's eager to know what competition does, right? That is where we come in. So it doesn't help if I just come and say that, okay, this is what you sell. People want to know what is selling, what is the assortment which is available at my portal vis-a-vis competition, right? Minute by minute, how do I change it? Pricing. I cannot stick to a price and say that this is how it's going to move, right? It started with brick and mortar stores. Online prices change, right? I look at competition, I immediately change the price, make it lower so that I can kind of, pull in consumers. Different channel. People are wanting to look at wholesale. Just imagine what's happening to the chemists, right? Chemists, all we know is sell medicines, OTC products. But over the last 2 years, because of COVID, they started selling FMCG products. So they become a very phenomenal channel for marketeers. They started selling household products. They started selling even groceries to some extent because other stores were shut. Right? When it comes to the period, right? When we said, it has to be real time. I need to start reporting at a very, very granular level. I need to be real fast and agile. And all this will happen when I start my proactive thinking, right? I cannot wait to say that, okay, let the client come back with a question, or I will sit and watch what's happening in the market and then start, developing a solution. It doesn't. So we always think ahead. Of course, COVID was very uncertain. Nobody even thought about it to see the changes which is happening. But otherwise, we kind of, think long term and said that what is required by marketers, how are consumers likely to change? So we do a forecasting of past behaviors of consumers to see what is going to happen in future, and accordingly kind of develop our products. So yes, proactive thinking is very important from a solution development perspective, and the speed at which things are changing the market, it is a must. That's my view.
Right. That's fascinating. But there are other facets to this which I will try and introduce as we progress with the discussion.
Sure.
Harsh, you want to come in at this stage?
Yeah. Taking off from what Bhanupriya was saying, the devil lies in the detail, the granularity of information that management goes into. But what is also very important here for an organization to be proactive is the importance given to upward communication. I have witnessed very, very large organizations where the real endpoints that are the touch points for the organization with its ultimate consumers, where those communication links are broken and feedback does not come in as quickly as it should, and feedback is too structured when it moves upward. That is where the ability of the organization to understand what's changing on a real-time basis rather than meet the change in the morning newspaper, that's where it makes a huge difference. Like if I have to draw an example, of the airline business. Now there are 3 or 4 touch points of consumers, flyers with the airline. It is the travel agents, it is the air hostesses, it is the ground staff managing the check-ins. And if you want to really know what people think about an airline, these are the 3 people you need to be in touch with. If you want to know how people are changing, how their habits are changing, if you do not let them speak, or rather for their voice to move up into the organization, you will always be wondering what to do next. It is so those communications, however big the organization grows, you have to be in touch with your consumer. You have to know what is it they are thinking. At the level at which Briefcase is, of course, it's a lot easier for Sohit and me to do it today because we're a small organization. But this is something we've learned by standing in stalls, in exhibitions, trying to sell the app, where when you're actually talking to the customer, you know what to do next. It's not that difficult. But that line of communication has to be there as you grow big.
Amazing stuff. I mean, I'm enjoying myself so much because so much of different perspectives are coming in. I am really happy to be part of this panel. I mean, what Bhanupriya was saying is at a different level. What Harsh is saying is the upward flow of information, which normally at some point of time seems to atrophy. I mean, as the organization grows larger, that information flow doesn't come, and then they face a crisis, and then they go to people like Bhanupriya and Nielsen to say that, look what's happening, can you help us? And she goes, pores over the data and says, okay, maybe this is what's happening. Now, Rampanda, you'd want to continue on the same lines, or we change track a bit?
I think I can add on to it.
Yeah, please do.
So I think when I have to think about proactive versus reactive thinking, one is it becomes important within organizations for some people to follow that role of being proactive thinkers and some playing the role of maybe reactive. Because if you look at the role of a CEO or a strategy teams, their role should ideally be a proactive thinker role. Whereas when you're thinking about somebody who is looking at maybe the CEO or some of the sales teams, so some of them, their roles becomes much more to be reactive. Let's say, for example, what happened during COVID, right? We noticed a lot of issues with respect to medicine supply. We noticed all of that. Now, I know it's an unprecedented event. Nobody could have foreseen that. So when you look at who actually played an active role with respect to maybe ensuring that the supply is there out there, so who is reacting to it? It's largely the role of production It's largely the role of the sales teams. It's largely the role of them who are basically dealing with it. The CEO also is playing a role. But what I'm largely trying to say here is that when you think about who is reacting to anything that is happening in the market, etc., it's largely the roles of the operational teams, right? When you think about proactive, it's largely the roles of CEOs, the strategy teams. I think they are the ones who have to start thinking 3 year, 5 year hence from now. Now, as we start thinking about who are the ones who have been best in terms of proactive thinkers, right? I can think of most R&D or research-oriented companies. They are the ones who would generally be very proactive in respect to thinking far ahead. What will work, etc. Investing in R&D. Now, is that something that we notice in India? I see very few instances where there is a significant investment that is happening on solving for something which is 5 years, 10 years hence. And mostly it is at this point of time, which molecule do I invest in? Where do I spend my R&D dollars into so that, I get a quick buck, right? So that's where the tendency has been. But if you look at it, I think most R&D focused companies, biotech companies, I think if you notice that, I think they would start thinking about maybe 5 years, 10 years hence. Think about the whole vaccine innovation happened not because it happened in 1 year. It happened because there was a technology in place, the RNA technology was there, and that we could leverage that particular platform to develop those vaccines. The speed to market happened because of that. It was for different purpose, right? So the point one is research-oriented organizations generally tend to be more proactive than reactive. Second is when you look at the roles that is being played within organizations, I think proactive thinking when it comes to it largely has to be pushed down. The CEOs or the strategy teams have to be more proactive in respect to communication. As Harsh was saying, one is upward communication definitely, but then what I also think is that when it comes to proactive thinking, a lot of people actually will not, in an organization, will not actually relate to how will this link to my current business, right? So it becomes important for you to lay down that vision. Why do we think this is important for us to, go down this path, and then lay out the strategy in front of everyone so that everybody buys to that vision. That is more important when it comes to, say, proactive. Reactive is something everybody will buy it because they're also facing the same challenges in the market. And that's what I think, when it comes to strategy and who has been doing that better compared to others.
Thank you.
Ram, I have a point here
yes, please,
if you can
please
allow me.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you spoke about the last the ground staff and the lower level of the organization being reactive than proactive, right? I think that's kind of changing, right? I mean, today, if you look at the sales organization in any company, I mean, they are the ones to pick up the change which is happening on the ground first than a CEO or a CFO. I mean, yeah, they have a long-term thinking, they have a vision, but these are the people who pick it up. But then it goes back to Harsh's point, is there upward communication happening? If I'm able to pick it up on the ground, but if I'm not able to pass it on to my organization to be able to plan things ahead, then it gets lost midway, right? But what all I'm saying is these are the people who have first-hand information. There's a lot of things they pick up and could be utilized, for the proactive execution bit.
Completely agree. Completely agree on that point, Bhanufe. But the point that I was trying to make is that who will drive strategy? So it will largely, when it comes to say proactive, it will largely be the larger or CXOs who will be driving it. And when they are devising that strategy, I think it will be important for us to also take the feedback from the ground level people, which is where I think the point around upward communication, being more honest, I think definitely comes into picture. But when it comes to pushing it down and have everybody buy into that vision, I think at that point of time, I definitely think that it has to be the leader who has to do that selling and who has to convince everyone that this is the path that we need to get into.
Sure.
Right. Another very interesting thing that I am reminded of before I come to Jitendra on this is what Bhanupriya was talking about is proactive role that is being played, say, by the salespeople who are at the field, but they're at the operational level. Now, in the case of traffic management in India, it was seen that in Bombay, the roads, this was a study that was conducted, the roads were essentially divided into 2 lanes, one for the outgoing traffic and one for the incoming traffic into the city. And it was found that the incoming traffic from a particular time, say from around 7:30 or 8 till about 10 was chock-a-block, whereas the traffic lanes that was going out of the city during that time was largely empty. But the division was half and half for the road. Now, the traffic constables, they came up with an idea saying that if you can just push the barriers from this time to this time, making the width of the road maybe 1.5 times and making the outward traffic much smaller because the traffic is less anyway. So by just doing that innovation, what happened was the traffic jams were eased to a very large extent. But that did not bring about, actually that information did not really go up to the top levels who manage traffic. So this was being done at the operational level down, and it worked very well. So, yes, the flow of information is important, and sometimes the innovations that are being done does not really result in strategic changes. It just helps people to come up with better sales figures or stuff like that. So we will be coming to that. But before that, I would like to hear out Mr. Dwivedi.
Yeah. Hello, Sanjeev. So, Bhanupriya, you brought the point about how I was talking about yearly to quarterly, monthly sales, and now we were talking about daily sales. You touched upon the hourly sales, which is getting monitored. Of course, there is no end to it as long as there is a process that, keep the employee not too much jittered about it. I will reserve my comment on that. But the another point that Ram Panda was bringing about is what is the extent of proactiveness or reactiveness that can happen. And he touched upon a very interesting point, which was about research oriented companies, and they are much more proactive than compared to other companies. I wanted to bring about, this is very interesting, because how can one company be forced to be so proactive and another company can afford to not be so proactive? So here I wanted to bring this important point here, that look at these pharma companies or these companies which are bringing up the new medicines and all that. The lead times for them to start working on a medicine and then testing it, getting certifications and all that, ultimately getting it in the market, there are huge lead times, 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, something like this, right? They have to, by definition, they have to look forward what would happen eventually, right? Now compare it with a company which has a lead time of very less, let's say 1 month. They put up an order, they get the item, they sell the items, right? They don't need to look at 5 years at an execution level, right? So this is one interesting element I thought I'll bring, that the what is the responsiveness of the supply chain that will force the company to either be hyper proactive or be reactive. Yeah.
That's interesting. We have Mr. Gunjan Kumar, who's been able to join in through the phone line. Could we go over?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please, go ahead.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm massively embarrassed about this. This has been such a fascinating conversation already. I was listening to everything. I've heard everything, that somehow I just couldn't unmute myself. I'm glad that we're back. Thank you so much for inviting me. And again, I apologize for the delay and apologize for the fact that I can't be on video. I'm in some remote area of Ooty, dropping my daughter to her boarding school, which decided to open all of a sudden. So here I am. And the network is pretty patchy. So I know that's not the best way to start with tons of apologies, but please bear with me. I would like to start by reframing the topic a little, and Professor Kakoti did that a little as well. The relative value of strategic planning, for me, is dependent on who you ask. I will focus on how the role of strategic planning is evolving and leave it up to you to interpret whether it is the backbone or not. I'll talk about 3 things today. Number one, the larger context. Any strategy is massively dependent on the context, and a lot of speakers have already talked about it. I will re-emphasize on some of those points. Number two, certain aspects of strategic planning, strategy, consulting, call it what you can. Certain aspects that continue to be critical. And number three, aspects of strategic planning that are changing and are evolving for better. So let's go through the context first. This pandemic has questioned all underlying assumptions of a successful business model. We are in the middle of a historic global event. I don't think there is any argument around that. Along with the massive social impact COVID-19 has had, It has also potentially reshaped the global business environment. A number of things we took for granted changed fundamentally. To elaborate on this, I'll take one example from what Thomson Reuters is facing. When the pandemic started, all of us started working from home, and so did our customers. The first feeling was, wow, we have so much free time now. All of a sudden, it became easier to find time with potential clients. We were doing more calls than ever. And when the initial euphoria died down a little, we started moving towards an equilibrium of sorts. Our clients became very picky about who they were giving their time to. The entire concept of nurturing a lead has changed. Let this sink in for a moment. You are in B2B sales. You can't meet clients face to face. You have to develop relationships in a virtual world. And even in that, clients are extremely selective about who they give their time to. For anyone who's working in business development or customer acquisition, this is a fundamental shift. All conventional wisdom on the concept of selling are fast becoming obsolete. This is just one simple, small aspect. We are being forced to reconsider all assumptions on which our strategy is based. It is not really a bad thing if you ask me. It is just that the abruptness with which this is happening is making things really challenging. The second part of context is, and again, number of us have already spoken about technology. Let me just underscore that point. Democratization and adoption of technology has made our markets severely more competitive. In the history of mankind, inarguably, we have never been this advanced technologically. If you're struggling with that notion, consider this, and I'm sure some of us have already heard this example. In 1990, a floppy disk could store 2 megabytes of data. In 2020, 30 years gap, a memory card, which is perhaps 1/20th the size of a floppy disk, has 1 terabyte of data or 1 million megabyte of data. You do the math on how far we have pushed the laws of physics. For quite some time, access to cutting-edge technology was prohibitively expensive. Companies with deep pockets could afford the initial cost of setup, and all the other companies had to make do with subscale technology. This ensured that companies which had deeper pockets had significant competitive advantage. Now, easier access to technology and concept of cloud in particular have in some ways decimated that advantage. Today, even as a startup, you can get access to the most cutting-edge technology without burning holes through your pockets. In the market Thomson Reuters operates in, we're coming across new competitors quite regularly. These one-year-old startups have developed capabilities that took us almost a decade to get to at times. Our markets have never been more competitive. We have to be nimbler than we've ever been. Otherwise, we run the risk of perishing. Adoption of technology has been quite rapid on the customer side too. Again, we've heard about digital adoption already. Thomson Reuters, we serve law firms in the US. I'll take that example. When the pandemic started, we were struggling to imagine how lawyers will take to the idea of working in a virtual setup. Working from home for lawyers is very alien notion, if you ask me. And we were surprised to see the results. From some estimates, and I'm not going to get into details of these estimates, 5 years of digital transformation among our customers has happened in less than 1 year. But there are many other factors, but let's just summarize the implication of these two major trends for strategic planning. Number one, you have to revisit all your assumptions about what it means to have a successful business model. And number two, you have to be nimbler, evolve faster than you've ever done before. With that context in mind, let's explore 3 aspects of strategic planning that continue to be critical to success of any business. One of the core reasons that strategic planning, strategy, consulting is considered critical to business is that by its very nature, it incorporates independent, unbiased, and in some cases outside-in perspectives. In my day-to-day job, it's almost embedded that I consider all possible angles of a problem. The challenge with businesses sometimes is that you're so enamored with what you have developed. It is very hard to detach from it. Your opinions become biased. In a lot of ways, the role of a strategy planning team is to help the leadership call a spade a spade. I've been in internal strategy teams and also external consulting teams. And this ability to provide an objective view of things is an immensely valued trait. It is not easy, though. It sometimes means that you have to make people see faults of their design. And that requires an immense amount of tact to deal with it. But we will not talk about the politics of it today. That's for another day. All strategic planning teams and exercises that I've been a part of have been strongly based on data. And again, we've heard about the importance of data from various speakers already. So I will not emphasize on the value of data and keep this to a bare minimum. But let me underscore the previous point again. Your ability to remain brutally objective becomes much easier if you have the data behind your assertions. It is very hard to refute an argument that is based in data. At the most fundamental level, the success of any business is dependent on how well does it meet customer needs. For that to happen, you need to understand and anticipate customer needs as well as you can. The successful strategic planning exercises I have been a part of, they address this very effectively. In my current role, one of my goals is about how many hours I have spent talking to customers. In every project we undertake, every problem is stated or restated from the point of view of customers. There is an obsession with understanding customer needs, and I think quite justifiably so. Now, like any other aspect of our business, even strategic planning processes or the approach to strategic planning needs to evolve and keep up with the changes of the world. Let's look at a few things, in fact, 4 to be particular, that are changing or have changed for better. One of the most profound changes happening across all businesses globally is in the definition of what it means to be successful. For a long time, the definition, and I'm sure we'll all resonate with this, the definition of success was to ensure scalable, profitable growth. And that definition is slightly different for startups, where you may find yardsticks like the rule of 40 to gauge success. Anyway, the point is, the way businesses looked at success in the past was largely around commercial targets. Strategic planning teams are now completely redefining that. We're not talking about scalable growth, of course, profitable growth, but sustainable growth. Things that are more socially responsible. ESG-related mandates are taking effect in Europe already. Many organizations in the US are voluntarily declaring ESG goals and performance. The new age strategic plans are invested in results as much as the means to get there. In most strategic organizations I've been a part of, strategic planning has been a standalone department reporting into the CXO. There's a certain merit to that approach, and again, let's not get into what the merit is. But what it also does is, it makes an assumption that only those people who are in the strategy team are actually capable of designing strategy. In my current role, and in the previous one at McKinsey, I'm beginning to see what you can call as the decentralization of strategy. It essentially does 2 things broadly. Number one, it imparts core strategy skills to teams like products, marketing, sales, so they are empowered to think strategically and take action strategically. And number 2, it acknowledges that all parts of the business have an equal stake in designing that strategic plan. On a slightly contradictory note to what I mentioned earlier, our strategic planning process in Thomson Reuters right now are putting more value on speed than on precision of data and analytics. Let me be clear, because there is a risk of misrepresentation here. Data is important, but I would rather use an analysis with 80% confidence in 1 week than an analysis which has 99% confidence in 4 weeks. At this point, let me again remind you of the 2 context points we talked about earlier. Agility is a non-negotiable aspect now. Lastly, any discussion about strategic planning, is incomplete without talking about culture as a strategy. Organization culture has been an important element for decades now. But what has changed now is this. Most organizations have realized that irrespective of the industry you are in or the products you make, the true assets are your people. Our strategic plans are heavily focused on diversity and inclusion and other aspects that contribute to the overall idea of culture. The idea in the end is to develop a workforce that brings its best to work every day and in every possible manner. This is a tougher, faster world, but there are tons of opportunities. Strategic planning teams and processes have continued to be critical by making sure that there is a degree of objectiveness, if you will, and the focus is there on things that are essential. And then there are certain aspects that are evolving and changing to make sure that we are meeting the changing needs of business environment. So before I end, just one last point. A lot of these things are not comprehensive in the way I've spoken about them. There are tons of things that fall outside the ambit of these few ideas. And I would also like to place on record that while I've spoken from the experiences that I draw from my past organization, these are not necessarily the official endorsements from any of those organizations. With that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar. I'm sure we missed a very good speaker amongst our midst. I wish he could have been there, but he's got his priorities right. He's on his way to drop his daughter in a school in Ooty, and we wish you all the best, sir. So coming to priorities, I think this is very important, and maybe you guys will end up this panel discussion thinking I'm a complete dud talking about all kinds of things, but I need to tell this story because I think this is very, very important for people who are working in the field of strategy and consulting. So they did this thing with a frog. They took in a frog and put him into a pot and gave a low flame underneath it. And very slowly the water started heating up. And the frog would just kind of twist and turn and adjust itself to the changes. So it was actually being very, very reactive to whatever was happening. Its agility was confined to just changing position, and once lying on its back and once lying on its stomach. And the water started heating up, and this frog kept on adjusting, and finally it got boiled. It died. Second frog. They bring in a frog and they put the frog into that hot water, and it jumps out immediately. So we have arrived at a situation where probably this marginal kind of adjustments to deal with the evolving situation may be like the first frog. Are we in that situation? There's something that we need to ask ourselves. And these are hard questions that we need to ask ourselves, because I feel that you guys or we guys are the guys who might be kind of giving the lead to industry in terms of strategy as to what to do next. Now, the company Kodak, we all know, I mean, we grew up with Kodak. It was the company for photography. And today, Kodak no longer exists as a camera manufacturer. It manufactures some papers on which photographs are printed. Now, they were not able to see the future, and that space was occupied by somebody else. Now, again, in a situation of dog eat dog, what has happened is there's a lot of controversy even regarding the virus that's spreading around, that spread around the world and shut it down, and the vaccines that came about. Because people are trying to correlate it with the vaccines or the antivirus that we use for computers or other programs. And they say that sometimes the virus itself has its origins in the labs where the antivirus would be prepared. So is there a similar scenario there? I don't know. Was that a business strategy? I don't know. But we should not shut the doors and say that everything is hunky-dory out there, everything is above board. Nothing is above board anywhere. So what happens is that we need to think about proactive. So we would want to leave some time for questions from the students. But before we come to that, there is one little thought that I was thinking about. I have with me a watch which is 100 years old. It's a hand-worn watch that was handed down by my father. It still works fine. It gives very good time. And once you wind it for 24 hours, it's good. There is a grandfather clock, which you can just once a week, you turn the thing and then it's okay. Now we are actually being stifled by garbage and batteries and all that. So there exists technology which says that wearing anything except a hand-worn watch is not cool anymore. And the world goes back to those hand-worn watches would save billions of batteries ending up in landfills. Possible? Yes, it's possible. Somebody will do it? I don't know. But it's time we did it. Now, it was the business strategists who came up with this idea that every time you buy a battery, a car battery or an inverter battery, you've got to return the old one. Recycling, reuse, all that came in, but that became government policy. And now if you want to buy a battery, you've got to return the old one. Now, a small little strategic change transformed the entire way business is done, and it brings about a huge amount of good for society. Sustainability, ESG goals, yes. So the last speaker was talking about some of these, and Mr. Gunjan Kumar, it was fascinating. Now, without much ado, I would like to open it up for questions, and I would request Achal Chaudhary to help me if there are in the chat box or wherever the questions are, or choose the people who would ask the questions. Could you please do that for me?
Sure, sir. So everybody is requested to raise their hands if they have any questions. Sain, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ansel. I would like to thank all the panelists for all the great viewpoints. This discussion really added a lot of value to us. I have one question. We have seen all the facets of management actually evolve and change with time. So what changes do you, all panelists, see in the next decade as compared to this decade in terms of strategy and consulting?
I guess anyone can take this up. Whoever wishes to could just go ahead and answer this.
Okay, I'll take this. So what I see, so as some of us have already talked about it, that it is not about strategy, it is not about the idea anymore. It is more about execution and putting up the processes to link the whole supply chain, right? So I see more focus on that, which would come over time, of course, with all the IT systems which are upgrading, because the volume of data that they can churn out every second, every minute is going to be big. Bhanupriya talked about the daily sales and hourly sales, online portal and all that. This is not something which is humanly possible, by the way. There would be, I mean, people, companies don't have those appropriate technologies to a level where all this can be totally automated. Okay, of course, there would be managerial decisions which are required, but that can't be expected on a minute on hourly basis, right? So the more focus on data visibility, more focus on the IT integration. We can see all the companies investing in the IT like big thing. COVID has been a big catalyst that ways. Okay. Also work-wise, more or less, more and more of virtual meetings to take up the things and not be haphazardly traveling everywhere. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add to this. Sorry. Did you want to add more to it?
No, I'm done.
All right, cool. Just one thing, and again, keeping in mind the current context of COVID, the last 2 years have made us rethink everything. And you might argue that we had plans for it, some companies excelled in it, but the reality of it was the changes were so abrupt that it made things extremely difficult. And from my point of view, the future of strategic planning and the way some organizations are likely to go is in being ready for it, or creating that readiness to deal with these changes. The role of data is a very crucial one in that. We will have massive amounts of data. In fact, we already do have massive amounts of data. How do you use data to ensure that you are in some ways ready for such abrupt changes in the market? I think in some ways going to determine who's successful and who's not. being ready for that change, in my opinion, is how things will be.
Got it,
I would
sir.
also like to add a couple of points here. So it is not just the industry or the sector that you're working on, right? Changes could happen from anywhere. So you need to keep your eyes and ears open. It could be political changes, economic changes, which could change the ways of working suddenly, again. And at the same time, it is very important to protect your core. Right. I mean, we started auditing or tracking FMCG products way back started in 1960, and I continue to do it. However, parallelly, I keep adding on more categories, more sectors, but I'm not willing to leave my core. I need to protect that, which is very important. So you spoke about the watch. You gave the watch example, right? So, I mean, most of us don't wear it today, but I can give an example. Last week, what happened? My son is taking his 10th exams, and suddenly the school sent a message on WhatsApp the day before at around 9:30 in the night saying this, please send an analog watch with your son because he needs to check, they were having some practicals or something. We came back and searched, we realized that we had 7 wrist watches, but none of it worked because we've not been using it for the last 2 years. And suddenly we realized it was so important to have kept at least one working by changing the battery or something. I mean, all of us had mobiles and other things to look, but I couldn't send a wristwatch to my son's school for his exams. So it is very important to kind of protect the core. There could be multiple changes happening across. You make slight changes, still protect the core, but yeah, you have to go with the wind in terms of the changes which is happening and thereby adapting to those changes.
We should move on to the next question. Quite a lot of hands that are raised.
Right. Anjali Mishra, you can go next.
Thank you, Anjal. So the panel discussed about how consulting has evolved, and it is not related to curating PPTs only, and the strategy is much more to a planning or to an organization. So my question is that what changes that consulting industry is witnessing or they have witnessed in the recent past?
Let me take that one. So I think the biggest change that the consulting industry has witnessed has been now dealing with disruptions brought about by the startup world. Earlier, while handling clients and the say, if I can draw an example, say you have a client like Tata Coffee, just as an example, and this is an imaginary one. Now you have a Tata Coffee which is trying to sell coffee. They have their own brands of coffee, and for a consultant who's consulting also has to now keep an eye out not only for competition, which will probably be a Nestle or a Davidoff. It'll also have to keep in mind startups, smaller localized brands, etc. The whole D2C wave that is now coming in a very big way in F&B today, which can impact the business of Tata Coffee. So in my conversation with friends from the consulting industry, I have seen that in almost everything, the speed of disruption that is brought out by startups and by their very nature being fast growing, it is something that they have to keep in mind while dealing with their traditional clients. And of course, when startups now also use services of consultants for their purposes as well.
Just adding on to it, right, the point which Harsh made, it's very important to keep your eyes and ears open. So I'll just give you an example of, again, you mentioned coffee, I'm going to take tea. In a society of about 1100 flats, just imagine there's this one person who procures Assam tea directly from Assam, and it is giving to at least 800 flats in that society, who were earlier buying a red label or any other branded product, have completely switched to some small brand which is directly coming in from Assam. Now, if I was a Unilever or a Tata Coffee, who's kind of monitoring, I suddenly see a drop in consumption. Now, where is it coming from? I need to kind of dig deep to figure out, okay, this is the changes happening. If this is changes happening in one society, just imagine if all societies adopt to it and change. right, to smaller brands, store brands, locals, the brands are going to suffer. That's the kind of change that is happening. And today we see that marketeers call us in their boardroom meetings. It's not enough that you present, go back, and then I take my actions after a month. No, you come and sit in my room, present, we will all sit together, take decisions, implement it the same day. So that's the kind of speed that we're talking today. And that's the kind of change that we're seeing today.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'll continue with that theme. Yeah, the two changes that I've seen in, and it's something that has been happening for quite some time, will continue to evolve, are with the implementation models, or rather the overall business model, and the commercial models of, and I think this is largely restricted to external consulting organizations. And I guess some of us have already spoken about it, so I'll keep it to brief. Commercial models first, the idea of how payments happen to consulting organizations has changed. Now, clients are very picky and pushy about how much do they want to pay and how they want to pay. Will it be contingent on the quality of results? So if it is 10% bottom line reduction, bottom line improvement, should it be something else versus 20%, and should it be something else? It's completely depend on the outcomes, and a lot of clients and customers are pushing for such outcome-based pricing models. So there's an added pressure. It isn't a thing of past where you could just quote a specific tag price and just get that with clients. It's getting harder and harder. And particularly in Indian context, if any of you have been involved in client consulting exercises, it is far, far more difficult. Number two, with respect to just the way consultants, external consulting organizations engaged earlier was, and borrowing on from Bhanupriya's point, is that you went in with a set of recommendations to your clients and you came out feeling very happy about it, because of course those recommendations are pretty smart. But then increasingly, clients are not happy with it. They're saying, these are your recommendations, now own it. Sit with us, run with it, and show it that this will actually result in a successful implementation in the end. At McKinsey, this whole thing forced people to develop implementation capabilities in a way that perhaps we would have never done if the clients hadn't forced us to. Now, the challenge with a model like this was that consulting is a very expensive affair. How do you create a long tail of implementation which doesn't burn holes into the pockets of clients was actually the bigger challenge there. But then that realization that our clients want us to own all the recommendations, that I think was a game-changing one, and will continue to be a game-changing one, because clients are not going to get less demanding. They will just become more demanding.
I guess we should go over to the next question.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question, Anjali. Aryan Man, you can start. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, panelists. It was a really great session. And my question is to Bhanupriya ma'am, that ma'am, we know that when it comes to strategic planning, we need to engage all the levels of management. But I want to know your thoughts that how do you think that we can involve the lowest level of management in strategic planning?
Okay, I'll take an example of our own company, right? So when we had these strategic reviews, in fact, last week we had a stat review for 2022, we make sure that we have a field staff on those meetings. It is very important. I'm very proud to say that in the last 4 or 5 years, we've been able to come up with solutions only because there were ideas which came up from this level. Like I mentioned earlier, these people are the eyes and ears of our organization. I mean, we are sitting in offices or homes and working today, and we look at the data, we hear from people, but these people are on the ground seeing what's happening, and they get to know a lot of information about our own product, about competition, what do consumers think. They keep talking to retailers day in and day out, right? So it is very important to kind of involve them, in any decision making. And if it is going to be a success or failure, it really depends on, this set of people that you have in any company, I would say. So it's very critical. Did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. definitely.
Okay, so we can move
and
on.
I'll just
Yes.
adding to that, and not any additional point, but honestly, I'm seeing the same in my organizations as well. That increasingly, whether it's the front end salespeople or product guys or customer service staff, there's more and more onus on these folks to talk about their experience with customers, things that they think can improve the overall results. So there is a higher stake, if you will, in this whole process from all these various parts of the company, which perhaps wouldn't have been in the earlier world where only the corporate strategy team or the strategy consulting organizations were expected to do things around it.
Okay, thank you for the question, Aryan. Let's move on to the next question. Aditi, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Achal. What I wanted to ask was that when we talk about long-term strategic planning, what exact timelines are we referring to, especially in the current VUCA world, that is volatility, uncertainty? What exactly are we referring to? What timelines are we referring to? Any of you can enlighten me on that. Thank you.
So I can take this one. So Aditi, when you're looking at, say, long-term planning, now that will vary by organization that you're looking at. Right, I think Jitendra was touching upon this point that when you look at, say, pharma organizations, because the lead time is so much for you to get into the market, you need to start thinking 10 years ahead, or you start thinking about it that far. Okay, but in an organization where technology is changing that fast, okay, so if you're looking at, say, maybe D2C world, you can't really think about 10 years ahead, because by the time you're thinking about 10 years ahead, you're already there's a significant change that will come in. So your timelines that you're looking at for your, in terms of the strategy, etc., also will keep on changing, right? So depending on the industry that you're looking at, some industries will always be like your 10-year, 15-year windows. Now those timelines are also shrinking as we speak, because you find a lot of AI implementation in healthcare largely around, how do I shrink my overall timelines for the molecules to reach the market, right? Similarly, what you'll notice is there will always be technologies that will keep coming, and you should always try to shrink it. So, depending on the situation, you have to look at the sector. You are looking at, say, what kind of involvement or what kind of impact the technology is having, and based on that, you need to think about what kind of timelines you could think about. Now, usually you would start with, say, when you're thinking about, say, in a boardroom conversations, you're starting thinking about, what should be my vision, etc. What I've noticed at least is that, people start thinking 3 years ahead. That's where they generally start. If you're looking at pharma companies, they will start thinking about from a sales strategy perspective, it will again still be a 3 years, 4 years ahead. But when it comes to an R&D strategy, I think those will largely be R&D or new product development. Those strategies will largely be about 10 years ahead, right? Because that's the typical lead time. But if you look at it, I think what I'm really trying to say is that looking at a sector, looking at, say, the role the technology is playing in that sector, you need to start thinking about the timelines. And timelines are also shrinking. So good point would be to start with a 3-year or a 5-year timeline. Short term will always be, as you're saying, I think that's also shrinking, right? Quarterly, monthly, now you're really talking about hourly also. So you're looking at a lot of data now coming through. So short term strategies will keep on evolving. It will become more and more short term. But long term, I think 3-year would be a good starting point, but it should evolve depending on the sector that you're looking at.
Yeah, I would like to add one more point to the question here. See, when we are talking about the strategy and the timelines, the kind of consumer preferences that change. Okay, so there are going to be change. We know about Kodak, we know about Nokia and all that. The point is not about this change per se. It is more about, okay, what is the level of change we are looking at? I'm sure Nokia sales would not have become zero in 1 month, right? There is a shift which is happening. So you look at those customer demand shifts which are happening and look at it at a macro level. Where is it leading to? Of course, at ground level, you need to do things, but at a strategic level, you need to change maybe something very entirely different, which is some of us were talking about the inertia also, the products that we have. We tend to be very close with them, and then we relate to them. We don't want to change. So the companies need to be flexible and see the consumer preferences which are changing and what is the level of change that we are looking at. Yeah, so that would basically define it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Sorry, just one point to add on. Any company can have a long-term and short-term strategy, but you need to keep thinking and working on it at every point in time. So it's not that I have a long-term strategy. It is long-term, so I can pick it up after 2-3 years. No, you will have to keep working on it every day. Just look at your Zomatos and Swiggies, right? They suffered for a few years, but they will have to keep making those changes. I started as a restaurant aggregator, but today I'm able to deliver groceries to people. I'm also able to deliver anything you want from one place to the other. So I need to keep making those changes. I need to be very dynamic in the market. Otherwise, I'm kind of done. Yeah. So you can have a long term, but it is very important to take it in baby steps and keep moving.
Correct. Got your point, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just adding an example from my world in this, we have a 3 to 5 year plan, depending on which business segment within Thomson Reuters we're talking about. But again, Vanpriya, to your point, we almost have a monthly check-in of sorts about, have any of the assumptions changed? Has any of the reality of it changed? What has changed that we perhaps must change our overall strategic plan in some ways? So there's a monthly, in some cases even a bi-monthly check-in of these long-term plans that happens to reevaluate.
We have 2 questions left, I think, Achal. And as a matter of strategy, I think we'll take both the questions together because we are also running out of time. And
Yes.
I think that would be nice.
Yes, sir, definitely. So Jaikishan and then Nikunj, you can just put forward your question and everyone can answer together.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I would really like to thank the panelists for giving us some really enriching and engaging insights. And my question consists of 3 aspects. Like we were talking about strategy, and we talked about strategy on a very macro level. But what I also feel is strategy can be implemented on a macro level in a very efficient manner if the micro implementation of the strategy is done very optimally and efficiently. So my question has 3 aspects. One is individual, second is organizational, and third is the government aspect of it. So in India especially, individuals and the functioning of organizations and people in general is very makeshift. Like if we are able to do certain things by marginal changes, we are okay with that. So how could how do we bring about changes in that thought, and what habits could be cultivated so that strategic thinking becomes ingrained in individuals? Secondly, when it comes to organization, Gunjan sir was speaking about decentralization of strategy. So in that scenario, how does the chain of command change in organization? And when that happens, how the role of grievance redressal system changes in the organizations, because in India especially, grievance redressal is a major issue. So what strategy to implement, how to follow the chain of command, and which chain of command to follow? Because when a lot of individuals focus upon strategy, then which strategy is the best one to follow? Who decides that? And thirdly, coming to the government aspect, is that what could government do? Because we school students, we are getting to experience and discuss these points, but in academia and undergrads and school education, there's not much focus on that. It's majorly mechanical. So what can government do or is doing so that we are on the path of where strategy becomes the backbone of the organization? Thank you.
Thank Jaikishan and thank Achal. My question is in the similar line, but a very different perspective. It is in the perspective of the ethical dilemma. Because as a consultant, we always promise to deliver our results in terms of that we can quantify, and especially in the bottom line of the financial. But nowadays, as the Gunjan talk about the sustainability perspective, so how to balance between the sustainability as well as the bottom line of the financial?
Okay, so I think I'll take the first question, which was with respect to, there are so many people devising strategy, then how do you ensure that there are all these thoughts are being assimilated, right? So let me clear one thing at least. What I've noticed is, even though we take a lot of feedback that is coming in from the people on the ground, So there is the team members actually, because there's an upward communication which is going on. So what happens is there is a reporting structure which is already in place, right? The sales team communicate whatever they are seeing in the market realities on the ground. So automatically this gets feeded up to maybe the regional sales manager, and that happens to the sales team. Now the thoughts are being assimilated based on what your ground realities are. The teams actually end up, creating strategies to counter it. Now, some of these strategies that will be there, which could be very, very micro. It may not be that you'll make changes wholesale at a pan-India level, but you might go and say, okay, we notice that there is a certain area or a certain region where there is a significant other play that is happening because of competitive forces, because of macro forces, or a government or political forces as well, right? So then what you will do is you will devise strategies which are very micro for that region. Now, does that mean that the team's voices are not heard? They are heard. Your strategies are being devised, taking feedback from individuals who are on the ground, and then regional level strategies are being developed. Now, that's how most strategy development happens, right? People don't really end up, they do execution strategies on the ground, which are very, very micro and very specific to the zone or a region that individual would be. But when it comes to an organization level strategies, some of this would be assimilated at the top level, and then some of that would be devised, which would be an implementation plan that could be at a micro level. Okay, so I hope that answered your question around how do you go about, taking all this into account and devising a strategy. I think that's one. And I think on the second point around ethical dilemma, let me touch upon that too. So yes, ESG is becoming a theme across when we talk about it. But then when you look at it, I think it is largely a theme that we have noticed across developed world. Some of the companies in India, which are large conglomerates, are actually focusing on ESG also as a theme for them to invest in, say maybe from an investment perspective or building their future products, right? So they are also pivoting their models towards ensuring that we are being environmental friendly, etc. Right? So you will notice, Tata's doing that a lot, in fact. So this is becoming a theme. But where is India in that overall story? I would still think that India is still taking baby steps here in terms of developing those strategies. I see a lot of that happening, even in terms of private equity funds. When they're investing in it, ESG diligence is becoming a norm now. They are really focusing on, are we doing something with respect to ESG or not? Is it just not only about the business, but we need to also look at what is the business doing in terms of creating that impact, right? So ESG will be a norm. So when you think about from a 5-year, 10-year window, ESG is something that will become definitely a conversations in the boardrooms. Any investments that are being done from a future perspective, there will be a discussion that will happen on ESG, and keeping in mind also the macro goals or the political goals the governments keep on having. So this will become like a norm for you. Is there an ethical dilemma? I don't think so, because when you think about investments and you are thinking about how do you make best use of those investments, and if your framework is decided in such a way that you will make those investments in such a way that you are also having an impact from an ESG perspective, there will be no ethical dilemma. Ethical dilemma only comes in when your framework is not well defined in terms of how you'll go about your investments.
I think that was a very, very nice answer to a complex set of questions, which the two young men have put across. Before we end, because we have come to the allotted time, but I would like to give a minute each to each of the panelists to speak what's on their minds, primary on their minds, starting with Bhanupriya, please.
Yeah, I will extend it from the earlier question which was asked, right? I mean, and a point to you students as well. So strategies could be developed, right? Taking inputs from ground level, from what you hear from consumers, etc. And products could be developed, right? But you should always look at the feasibility and scalability of the outcome or the product, which is very important. While you work on strategies, convert it into product solutions and take it, you should also be willing to kind of kill an idea which is not going to work. I think that's a big failure with most of the marketers. Because you've developed, because you've invested in a factory, because you've put in a lot of effort, you keep maintaining that product, again, investing money on it, but it's not going to help. So you should be, very quick in terms of killing that idea or product and keep moving on, which is very important when it comes to, kind of business. And when you look at priorities, right, which will be very helpful to you as well, look at the kind of effort you put in, and the outcome. Higher effort, higher outcome. Good, right? Good to go. Higher effort, very little outcome. You need to think about it, right? I mean, is it even necessary for me to do that? Yeah. If it's lower effort, lower outcome, I mean, I might as well not take it. Yeah. So anything which you look at it in your life, just look at these two things, the effort versus the benefit, and then kind of move on. I think this has to be thought through, at every aspect of life, not just personal, not just professional, but personal as well.
Right. Thank you very much. Can we come to Harsh, please?
Yeah, I think it's been a wonderful morning listening to everybody talk about strategy and implementation. And my 2 bits on something that is extremely important to a lot of the questions also that got raised is the importance of clarity of vision. I know I'm going to repeat the example of the lightning here, but it is extremely important that while you will be moving in a haphazard manner, that's how business actually happens. But as long as you're moving in the right direction, which you intended to, you'll be fine. And that clarity of vision, I think this also goes to some of the questions that were asked earlier, has to percolate right down to your ground staff as well. Because when information comes in, there is always a lot of overload, especially in today's day and age, where data is no longer a scarce commodity. In which case, it is extremely important that at every level, there is a filtering that happens, given the vision and mission of the organization. The other part where, which is extremely important and often understated, is the importance of actually starting. Very often, I have seen in organizations, there are conversations and meetings and committees and reports about what should be done. But actually, given the scale, size and scale, they just don't end up starting in that direction. And that's where the importance of having pilots, the importance of having even within a large organization, something very new can be started with a very small group, a geographic division or a functional division, to actually get started. So many times organizations are quick to understand that, yes, we need to change, but they just don't start to change, and therefore they don't change.
Right. Thank you. The inertia is apparent in almost every organization that you can think of. Thank you, Mr. Harsh. Now, next, I would like to come to Mr. Rampal.
Yeah, so my 2 bits here. So when you're thinking about strategy, I think I'll emphasize on, say, maybe a couple of aspects that you need to keep in mind. One is communication. Now, most strategies fail if you don't communicate well. Now, this could be your upward communication, or it could be your downward communication too. I think when you're thinking about, say, I think this goes back to Sanjeev's thought around, say, proactive versus reactive, right? Again, so when you are thinking a long-term strategy, etc., for you to make that implementable, you need to also start thinking about how do you communicate that strategy to people and make them buy into your vision. Because end of the day, if you're thinking about a 5-year, 10-year frame, it's not that everybody will be able to relate to what you're trying to do. People will start thinking whether this is practical now, what are you trying to, make us a technology company now? So there will be some of these questions that you will come across, right? But if you're able to articulate your vision properly to, say, to ones who are going to implement it or ones who are going to take it forward, I think that's definitely a piece where most strategies can work wonders. Similarly, I think the flip side of it is, again, the upward communication. If the team below is not communicating properly because they are thinking that, okay, should I communicate this or not? The market realities will not reflect, right? So end of the day, your strategies should be devolved, which not only on a piece of paper or based on, say, maybe certain data that is flowing in, but also based on market realities. So there is a communication angle, which is very much important. Second piece, which I would talk about, is simplification. Because what I am noticing is that a lot of places, yes, there are a lot of technologies which keep coming in. But then what I also notice is okay, there is no dashboard. Okay, why don't we create a dashboard? So there's a BI tool that comes in. Okay, there is another IT tool that comes in. There are a lot of these tools that come in, but end of the day, these are not integrated, right? So what really happens is the team wanted it to be like a one-stop dashboard. But then you would notice that because there are so many systems, etc., that are there in place, and each system does its own job, there is always going to be complications that arise because of that. So when you're thinking about devising the strategies, don't make life complicated for people. Try to make it simplified, right? So these are the two bits that I will leave you with in terms of how should you think about strategy.
Thank you very much. And as we evolve, I think organizations are getting more and more complex, and it becomes very difficult to even understand what's going on. I would now want to come to Mr. Jitendra Dwivedi.
Hello again. So my closing remarks would be less from the discussion point which is there. I want to say a few other things because all the people who are listening, they are students, and more or less they are going to go into the business world very soon. I never thought that sitting in a classroom would be a luxury, frankly speaking. So the times that you have, that we all are reeling in, is actually a mammoth thing. And hats off to you all to be being able to interact in a forum like this. For the future, I wish you good luck, and be clear at your personal level when you are communicating to people, especially decision makers or anyone big. Try to understand what is your objective of that discussion, what you want to get out of it, what is your personal strategy there. Okay, do a little homework on these kind of discussions, and you will swim through. That would be my closing remark. Little contradictory to the overall theme, but I would go with that.
No, it's sinking in perfectly well. Thank you very much. I don't know whether we still have Mr. Gunjan Kumar online. Are you
yes,
there, sir?
I'm here if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Please, sir.
Wonderful. I'll give some unsolicited advice as well, so please bear with me. Clearly, all of us, and particularly the students who are listening in, are looking forward to a career in strategy consulting. Here are a few things that you should bear in mind. Number one, develop this ability to be brutally objective, brutally based in data. Make data your perfect ally. And that's number one. In the current world, and given everything that we've talked about, speed, agility is perhaps the most important thing. You have to be fast and figure out a way to be as fast as you can. And three, somehow we have this romantic notion of strategy as to, I don't know what will happen when you get into strategy. There is a lot of grunt work that happens behind the curtains. Somebody talked about strategy being a PowerPoint factory. It actually is. There's tons of data that you need to go through. There's a lot of talking that you need to do. There's a lot of politics that you need to deal with. And I love the point about communication, which is such an important one. You might have the best strategy, but if your product people don't understand what you're talking about, it is most likely to fail. So those are my few cents of wisdom on if you're looking for a career in strategy, which I guess you are. Please bear these things in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been a fascinating discussion, and one thing that I've always believed in is pushing the margins. I mean, if a margin is set, you push. And so we pushed the margins of time before Achal could cut us off at 12. I just said a minute each to each of the panelists, and then we succeeded in pushing it 15 minutes. And that's quite a bit. So in life, in consulting, in everything, we need to push the margins and be the change that we want to see. On that note, thank you very much, each of the panelists. I really appreciate you finding the time to being with us. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot of new things, and I'm sure that the entire audience are grateful for you being with us. Thank you very much. Over to you, Achal.
Naval, you can continue with the mementos.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed panelists and also our panel moderator, Dr. Sanjeev Kakoti, sir, for joining us today and sharing such enriching thoughts. And I'm sure that also our participants today today would have a lot to take away from today's discussion. Now, we would like to extend a small token of appreciation to all the extreme panelists which have joined us today. So first of all, Mrs. Bhanupriya Sudhakar ma'am. So this is a small token of appreciation from our side. You would be receiving it shortly in a physical form.
Thank you.
Mr. Gunjan Kumar sir.
Right here, but can't see you. You can't see me, unfortunately.
we really wish that you would have been actively present on the screen with us. But a small token of appreciation from our end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. For next, Mr. Harsh Parekh, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us and your the way you talked about how the vision needs to be clear and everything. That was quite enriching. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks to you too.
Then Mr. Jitendra Dwivedi, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for being here today and your thoughts about talking about the objectives and how you need to be clear about them and everything. It was quite enlightening.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And last but not, Mr. Ram Panda, sir. Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. And your talk about communications, it was quite impressive and quite enriching to all of us. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So that would be it from our end.
So thank you very much. We sign off now. The second, I think, discussion starts at 1 o'clock. So you have a couple of minutes more to freshen up and be back again. Thank you very much. We really hope to see you on campus someday. And we are extending to you a very, very warm welcome. Whenever you choose to come, please allow us to be your host. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.